And a pleasant good afternoon out there in Irish Breakdown land. I am Vince D'Addario. I am the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. And with me, as always, is that guy right there. That is Brian Driscoll. He's the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. He is joining me on our Monday podcast. And today, what we do on Mondays is we are going to talk about the Brian Kelly press conference. We're going to break it down, just kind of react to some of the things that he said. Some interesting things that he said today. And then we are going to kind of take a trip around college football and talk about some of the games that were, highlight some of Notre Dame's opponents, things of that nature. Again, just a crazy day of college football.
And it wasn't supposed to be. There was not really that many good matchups. And the couple good matchups that there were, like Notre Dame's game was, kind of an ugly game until Notre Dame just blew Wisconsin off the mat. Arkansas dominated Texas A&M for 4 quarters. It was some of the other games maybe that people didn't anticipate that I thought were the most entertaining.
Sure. And I'm kind of keeping an eye on the chat over here. We're not really talking about Notre Dame and Cincinnati today, but guess what? The next 4 days are all Notre Dame Cincinnati. So I see your questions. I see you guys over there. But today's show is more about the press conference, which will be a little bit Cincinnati, and then but more about Wisconsin, and then college football as a whole, not necessarily Notre Dame. So just so everybody's aware, that's kind of how we do Monday shows. But we will get to it if we can. But anyway, Brian Kelly press conference. Let's talk about some of the things that he brought up. First, let's talk quarterbacks because that's the headline, right? He did bring up quarterback play,
and he was asked about quarterback play a lot. Yeah. First of all, he said, obviously with Jack Cohn, it's sort of what we talked about. Yes, he cleared. Well, I don't know if we talked about the show, but I definitely talked about it yesterday. I don't know. So many people called yesterday.
I know.
So basically, Jack went into the locker room, got X-ray, and everything looked good on the X-ray. That's why they had him come back out and throw to see how he felt, and he couldn't go. Because sometimes an X-ray can be clean, but the pain is there or the structure isn't sound, and you feel it, in your body if you can feel it. I've played with a really bad ankle injury one time. We were actually playing at Chowan College, and it was my first career start. And first quarter, I got my ankle rolled up on bad. I had to come out for 2 plays. And I was like, look, I got enough adrenaline right now where it's structurally sound. Now they taped it up, and I can still drive off of it. Jack's situation was clearly he couldn't drive off of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so he may, Brian Kelly said X-rays came back good, but they really aren't going to know, and he alluded to this. They aren't going to know until they get out on the practice field and see how he can handle a practice. He said that if Jack is healthy, he's a starter, and it's how it should be at this point in time. Now,
Agreed.
If Jack plays, he's going to have to continue to get better and get back to being the guy that he was the first couple games more than he was, at stretches of the last couple. But he mentioned that Tyler Buckner said he felt good, so there's some optimism that he'll play. But again, same with him. It's going to be about let's see how he feels once they get out on the field this week. He said if Jack can't go, Drew Pine is the starter, and Tyler Buckner would play, which is exactly what we've been saying all summer.
All along.
Tyler Buckner is the change of pace quarterback. Drew Pine is the number 2 quarterback, meaning if something happens to Jack Cohn, Drew Pine's the quarterback.
Right. That's always been the plan.
Right. That's what Brian Kelly – for now. Now, again, end of the season, Tyler may be ready to take over. Who knows? But right now, Drew Pine is the number 2 quarterback.
And I loved everything about the announcers, Gus Johnson and Joe Klatt, I believe. I loved everything about, I'm sorry?
Joel,
excuse me. I loved everything about what they did. Gus Johnson gets me fired up as I'm watching things. I mean, his call of the Tyree, kickoff return was unfreaking believable. The only thing I didn't like is that they kept calling Drew Pine the 3rd string quarterback. That's it. That's the only thing I didn't like because it was
people in the Notre Dame media call him the 3rd string quarterback. So,
come on, people. You get the depth chart every week. He's been second on the depth chart every week. We've talked about the fact that Tyler Buckner gets a package. I mean, it's so clear as day But anyway, it doesn't take away from anything
Right.
that Pine did. He did a great job, but I
Yeah.
kind of half expected him to do a great job because I think he's a good quarterback. So,
Right.
So anyway, that's the only thing I didn't like from that game.
The other thing that he mentioned was you asked about, the sacks and how the quarterback can play a role in the pressures. And I thought he put too much on the quarterback. And again, we have something on the Irish Breakdown message board where we put all 6 snaps, and he talked about how the ball's got to come out quicker. And there are times for that. I didn't feel that was the case Saturday. And you and I talked about this. There was one play where not that the ball's got to come out quicker, but he's got to climb the pocket and go.
Right.
On all the plays where he was sacked, it was pressure either got to him quickly or pressure got late because they were 3rd and long situations, 3rd and goal situations where I'd have to go look at the sacks. I think at least 2 or 3 of them were on 3rd down and 3rd and longs.
Yeah.
That's something that, run the ball better and you're going to be able to be more effective on 3rd down and throwing the football. So, to me, he talked about how Jack Cohn needs to get the ball out quicker. He needs to be more decisive. And that's something that I agree with Coach Kelly about. I think that was something that made Jack so good in the spring, made him so good in fall camp, made him good in the first game of the year. And even at times on Saturday, I mean, early in the game, if you go back and break it down, Vince, when they were running stuff where there was intermediate to short throws, he was catching that thing and getting it out quick.
Right.
Then the run game starts faltering. And they start getting in 2nd and 10, and then the set now all of a sudden you're in 3rd and 15, or it's 2nd and 8 because you went for +2, then you throw and you're getting sacked on 2nd and 8, those type of things. It's still the sacks that are problematic, and yes, there are things Jack needs to do better in there, but it's still going to come down to the offensive line playing better.
Absolutely,
and that's going to be the key. But yes, it's what we talked about yesterday. Coach Kelly kind of alluded to. He didn't say this. But you and I talked about how Jack's not getting the ball out as quick because he is anticipating pressure.
He can't do that.
He can't do that. That's
right.
on him.
We agree with that. We agree. Look, I still think Cohn should be the starter if he's 100% healthy. And I'm, again, seeing the chats over here. Yeah, if he's not 100% healthy, you don't start him. I have no problem with that whatsoever. He needs to be 100% healthy. And we won't know the answer to that until Thursday when we hear the press conference.
Basically,
we hear a source or something.
Can we? I want to elaborate on what you just said, Vince, and what we've been saying, because I think that you and I say something that we understand to be true that maybe we're not explaining correctly. We're talking coaches, and when we talk about 100% healthy as a player, it's not that he feels perfectly fine like he's on the first day of camp. It's about do you have the 100% mobility that you had? You can have full mobility and still be in pain.
Sure.
It's about, is the pain causing so when we say 90%, we're not talking about he has no pain. We're talking about, is the pain causing him to be 90% of his mobility?
Right.
That's what we refer to. So when we say healthy, we're not necessarily saying Jack can't feel any pain. If he feels any pain on Saturday, you bench him. That's not what we're saying. We're talking about when that pain becomes a hindrance to you moving at a certain speed. That's what we mean when we talk about a football player being healthy, or 100% healthy or 95% healthy. It's not evaluating the degree to which his body has healed. It's the degree in which he can play through the pain at a certain speed. I just want to make sure that when we say that, the people understand what we mean by healthy, because he's going to have pain on Saturday. You don't go from not being your ankle being too sore or too much pain to play on this Saturday to all of a sudden you feel no pain a week later. That's not what we're talking about. He will feel pain. It's about, does it prevent him from moving a certain way?
Right.
If he can't move, so when we say if he's not 100% healthy, if he's not moving around the way that he was pre-injury, then you have to go a different direction, especially against a front seven that's not great. They have one great edge rusher, but Notre Dame's made several not great defensive line look great.
Yeah,
that's a concern.
They have, but I will also say, just to play devil's advocate, they've also they've made some pretty good edge rushers not impact the game like they could have. I will say that.
Yeah, but I think at the expense of other things.
That's fair.
Right? So, last week they chipped on George Karlaftis a lot, and they did some things. I think that hurt the offense because, again, they weren't able to get guys out. Saturday they did some things with 2 tight ends and such, and it's not a coincidence that the more they started to go to this big personnel and they started to keep tight ends up more on pass, in pass protection, all of a sudden the pass game's not as good. I don't think it's a coincidence.
Right.
And so I agree with your sentiment that they're doing that, but I don't think it's necessarily a positive,
right? Because
it's taken away. The fact is when you have to do that with your line, it's going to hurt you. But we're going to see how this looks Saturday. You have to, and to me, it's about a balance. Finding a balance, and we're all about. You and I are both all about mixing up personnel, and I'm okay going seven man protections at times. It's just I would like to see, like what we were seeing from time on Saturday. We're seeing a lot of play action. A lot of times, play action isn't necessarily about fooling the defense. It is to a degree, but it's also about setting a protection. There are certain protections you have that are play action protections, and that's really what you're looking to do, regardless of how much fooling you get.
Sure.
I would like to see Notre Dame, however, still do some things where they actually do some play actions where maybe it's a deeper play action, where you can, maybe go some pistol and get some downhill and maybe do like a half roll or do a play action and you have Jack Cohn roll. I think those are some things that, number one, can change the launch point. Number two, can protect your quarterback a little bit more. And then number three, give him a little bit more time to go. But, those are things that when Brian Kelly talks about, get the ball out quicker, yeah, that's one thing, but there's a lot of things that have to get affected. So I don't go down that rabbit hole. We'll talk plenty about that during the week as we break down the game.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about, what happens if so-and-so starts and we'll talk about all of that stuff. I promise you. Sparkling Swan, I see you got a comment in there about Pine starting, and if he plays well, do you keep him as your starter, et cetera? Cohn is the starter, right? And I don't, if that's hard to say. I'll throw the question up here just because I brought it up.
That's because it fits what we're talking about. That is a bold take. And honestly, so let's say I think we'd have to determine what we mean by well. Does he complete 62% of his passes for 230 yards and manages the offense and they win 24-20? No, I'm not making a quarterback change.
No.
If Drew comes out and looks like he completes well, remember how Ian Book looked his first start against Wake Forest? If Drew Pine comes out and looks like that, okay. Hey, Jack, let's give your ankle another week to heal. You know what I mean? And then get into the bye week and figure some stuff out. I mean,
sure.
And it also partly includes what made him play well. As a coach, you have to determine, yeah, Jack could have done that. Or something, like he's giving us okay, so when we didn't going back to 2018, I know you and I were not working together at the time, but people know we've been friends a long time. We talk football all the time.
Yep.
We didn't like how they handled the Brandon Wimbush to Ian Book scenario, because basically for 2 games they ran an offense that was designed for Ian Book and it was setting Brandon Wimbush up for failure. Okay, so that was something I didn't like. But when they made the change, the offense was generated towards Ian Book, right? And the thing about that scenario was that you look at this one, to me, it's on one hand with 2018, the offense just was completely flatlined. And a lot of it had to do with the quarterback's inability to run the offense that they wanted to run. This year, it's a completely different situation, right? Having said that, when you watched Ian Book take over in 2018, clearly the offense was working way better than it had in the previous 3 games, right? I mean, against Wake and it was okay. It looked so much different.
Sure.
And it was noticeable that okay, we didn't like how they got there, but if you were going to run that offense, then Ian Book needed to be your quarterback. And you can see how much better Ian Book ran that offense. So to make a short story long, if you get Drew Pine in there and all of a sudden there's just things that you're able to do that you couldn't do before, and your offense clearly is just clicking more, then you do have to sit down and make those tough decisions. And we're not denying that. And I think you and I both agree. If I speak for you, if I'm speaking for you incorrectly, please correct me. But I think you and I both believe that there's a chance that if Drew Pine starts this weekend, he could look so good that we have to have this conversation.
What?
But he'd have to look really good, and the offense would have to move it away where you're like, yeah, we haven't seen that from Jack.
Yeah,
and I consider that, in my opinion.
In the way I see it playing out is if Pine has the kind of game that you're talking about, I think that the offensive line will have taken some massive steps forward. And if they do that, well, what happens if Cone was back there behind a massively improved offensive line? You know what I mean? And I think that all needs to be taken into account.
In my scenario, I wasn't necessarily referring to that.
Because I was reading the question there, and it says Pine starts, O-line plays well.
Yeah.
That's the big one for me. Is I don't know that will be the case. And if it is the case, I think either one of those guys could be successful. Now, Pine is running for his life, but he's still making plays. He's getting outside the pocket, and he's keeping his eyes downfield, and he's finding guys, and he's hitting deep. Then we have that conversation.
Or he's just not getting skittish when when the pressure comes. He's getting the ball out quickly. He is doing. I mean, so that's the thing I look at. That's the thing I look at when I say that. I want to address something here real quick. Domer Grizz says the IB article listing the depth chart for Cincinnati did not include a second string left tackle. Is that how it's listed on the depth chart from Notre Dame, or is it a simple oversight? I know we're thin, but dang. No, that's how it's listed on the depth chart because there's an or on the first team.
Right.
So it's Michael Carmody or Tosh Baker. So whoever the other or is would be the second tight end. So I'm not going to repeat on the second one. It's, if it's Michael Carmody or Tosh Baker on the first line, I'm not going to then repeat that on the second line. There's another position where that's the case. So like I have Xavier Watts listed as a second team rover, not Isaiah Pryor, because Isaiah Pryor's up on the first line as an or.
Yeah, right.
So that's and they don't list a third offensive tackle. Now we all know it's Joe Alt, right?
Yes, because we saw it on Saturday.
But Joe Alt's also listed as the backup right tackle, so I'm not going to have him listed as the backup left tackle and the backup right tackle.
Because people do teams do that, and it's a little ridiculous. You're just filling it in with the same.
I just want to be clear
guy.
So people understand that, that's kind of how it's mentioned. So if there's like an or at a position like that, I at times I won't put that guy on the second team because it's just assuming whoever's not in the game from the first team is that guy. So hopefully that clears that up. But he also talked a lot about the offensive line, Vince, and I'll tell you, he didn't say anything negative about the offensive line. He said, things that you expect the coach said, we got to play better and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He made one comment I didn't like at all, but his overall tone was very, very unhappy, and not unhappy at the media for asking about it.
Because we've seen that.
That wasn't it. It really wasn't that. It was more of like yeah, guys, okay, I get it. They're not playing well, right? He mentioned that the right side has been assignment correct. And he said the left side needs to be more consistent and assignment correct like the right side. And I'm like, if they're playing the right side is your standard, this is not going to be a fun year. But I do think I get what he was saying. A lot of the run-throughs have happened on the left side.
True.
But there's been some where Kane Madden's let guys run through as well. And he talked about how Jarrett Patterson's got to kind of bring it all together and stuff like that. But for me, it boils down to at least – and he said, look, coach – he said everybody's got to get better. He said, the quarterback's got to get better. The running backs have got to do better. And then he said, they've done a great job in pass pro and all that. But, receivers but he did say like the coaching the coaches got to get better. And he didn't he said
he's
all
not gonna,
of them.
He'll never say individually.
Nor does he necessarily have to.
Right.
If he simply says, hey, look, we got to do a better job of getting these guys prepared to play at a high level and execute at a high level. We all know he's talking about. He doesn't need to say Jeff Quinn's done a crappy job getting these guys where he's got to do better. I don't need him to say that.
It would make everybody in the
Jeff. It would make all of us happy,
real happy.
But it would undermine Jeff Quinn's authority with his players.
Yeah. Right.
He needs to sit there and say, look, this is not – and he kind of talked about the standard and then needing to play to a standard. So there were some things that I said that if Brian Kelly's admitting that publicly, I got to think he's having some very harsh come to Jesus conversations with Jeff Quinn and the offensive staff privately. So that was a positive. I liked that coming out of this press conference too, Vince. And he said Sebo Flemister is going to be back this week. Again, 4 games, and all of a sudden he's miraculously back.
Amazing.
He did. Last thing I want to talk about, he talked about good Justin and Jason Adamiola of Ben, which shocker, we all see that. He
Right.
talked about the penalty that he got against
Yeah.
against.
We didn't talk about this.
We did not talk about that, and I want to talk about that.
Absolutely.
I want to know your opinion on this, Vince, because I have zero problem with Brian Kelly getting a penalty there.
No, we
meaning not the refs flagging him. I mean him taking him.
Yeah,
him doing that.
So yeah,
because you were there. So explain people what happened, because it doesn't show up on TV.
Right. And I didn't see it happen. So I had to ask the guys around me. I said, what was he so upset about? Well, what happened was Kyle Hamilton was on the ground and he was just getting his butt whooped on the ground by two Wisconsin defenders. And they were kind of, leaning on him and messing with them and trying to take out their best player. I mean, let's be honest. Let's call it what it was. They know who Kyle Hamilton is. He was playing special teams. That's a chance to take some free shots at a guy that you don't normally get an opportunity to take free shots at. And they were taking those free shots. And Brian Kelly came to his defense and he reamed the official about that particular situation. And he basically was saying, how can you let that happen to my guy and not call a penalty? And he got up in the referee's face and they called a penalty on him. I loved it. Absolutely loved it, because it shows that Brian Kelly's got his guys back. It shows that he's a player's coach and he's not going to let that happen. And I love
it's like when a basketball official takes a tech.
Exactly.
Like I'm good with it. He had to do. I mean, based on what I was told happened, he 100% needed to get a penalty there. And I saw him going off on the ref, and the ref looked at him and said, "We have to." And it's like you saying, "We have to throw that flag. You came on the field. We have to." I mean, that's the rule. We have to. That's fine.
Sure, and
whatever.
Fine. Okay.
But I don't think Brian Kelly gave a crap about the flag.
No.
Brian Kelly's like, "Okay, flag me, but then flag those guys too."
Exactly.
Because you're absolutely right. It was happening to Kyle Hamilton for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
That's their best player. And Wisconsin, I don't want to call Wisconsin a dirty team, but let's just say they border on playing past the whistle a little bit more than they should.
Well, look, that was a dirty play. I mean, that was a dirty situation. I mean, call it what you want. That was dirty. Like, come on, man. Like, you're really going to take advantage of a guy who's on the ground like that? That's terrible. And I don't like that kind of play. I've never coached my players to do that kind of nonsense. I think that's ridiculous. Beat them up in the whistle, between the whistles. But when he's on the ground like that, okay, lay on him, whatever, but don't do that extra stuff.
Brian Kelly's comment today was phenomenal, though. He goes, apparently they felt they needed to throw a flag on me for them not officiating that correctly. He savaged the officials.
I love that.
Press conference
I love it.
Which I thought was awesome. I mean, and to me, like I don't care if he ran to midfield and got a penalty on that. Like, you have to have your players back.
Yes.
You have to.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
And the players see that. And it may be like, hey, you know what? I don't like coach, or, maybe we don't agree on things, or because every coach has players that don't like them. But if the kids think that you have their back, they don't care if they like you or not, or if you hang out together away from the field or not. It's like, look, coach has my back. I'm going to go do what I need to do.
Yep.
That kind of thing can absolutely rally a team, in my opinion. And so I loved that. And when did that happen? Do you remember when that was?
Oh, I don't remember exactly when it was, but it wasn't like when Notre Dame had a commanding lead or anything. I mean, it wasn't towards the end.
Yeah.
It was earlier than that, when the game was still, in doubt.
I'd really like to look and see when that happened and the correlation between when that happened, when Notre Dame started beating the crap out of Wisconsin. So I am very curious about that.
Yeah, I gotta try to find it. I'm there's got to be a way to find the penalties, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll look for it while we're talking.
I have this friend of mine who literally calls me every day during the show. And I tell him every day, dude, I do a show from 12:30 to 1:30 every day. And every day he still calls me at like 1 o'clock. And I'm like, come on, man.
I love it. I love it.
So anyway, but yeah, I had no problem with that. I like that he did that. I thought it was great. Because, sometimes like a coach can get a penalty, like, dude, you got to be more disciplined than that. Like if he was just like, if he'd have got the penalty, like just arguing on a non-hold, or a pass interference that should have been called, all that kind of stuff, then I'd have been like, come on, coach, you got to be more disciplined. But when you're getting a penalty because you got your players' backs, get it. Get two of them if you need to.
It.
I don't give a crap.
Get it.
Get it. Because also the other thing too is it was in between plays, so it wouldn't have been like it had been 1st and 30 if you got 2. It just meant you'd have started 1st and 10 back 30 yards. If that's what it takes to send a message to your team and the opponents that, hey, you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. So anyway, I dug it. I dug it. I would have loved to have had a coach that did that. Like, I'm getting late hit, I'm getting cheap shotted, and he's willing to take a 15-yard penalty to have my back. I'd have been all about that. So anyway, but that's about it from today's podcast or press conference with Brian Kelly.
I did find it, I believe. Okay. It was in the 4th quarter. It was on a 4th down, so it was on a change of possession, obviously, because it was a punt situation, right? Trying to figure out where. Okay, so it was, let's see, Pine pass. So it was after the Pine touchdown to Austin. That's
so when 24-13, basically.
Correct. Yes. And so it was before the Door field goal, the 37-yard field goal. So again, the game was still in doubt at that point. I mean, so
sort of, yeah. I mean, 11-point game with I think there's about 7 or 8 minutes left at least at that point in time.
Yes.
Plenty enough time to get 2 possessions together.
Absolutely. Yep. So yeah, it was I loved it. And I don't even care when it happened in the game. But the
only thing I meant was,
did it fire everybody up?
Yes, that's kind of what I was thinking about.
After that, they had a field goal and 2
the defense certainly played inspired the rest of the way.
Yeah, right. It happened with 5 minutes and 20 seconds left.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So anyway, but yeah, good stuff. Okay. Let's talk about college football, Brian.
Yes.
Because this week, it's amazing to me how usually you get like one weekend with like some upsets and some kind of, some craziness or whatever. But we've had multiple weekends already.
So, Vince, you and I said before the season that we thought this was going to be a weird year of college football. It's been way more than I thought. I mean, just, like Fresno State goes on the road and beats UCLA and then has to play UNLV down to the wire. UNLV is awful. I mean, awful. Just a wild week of college football. And another, I mean, it's like every week, even when and the thing is, this wasn't supposed to be a great weekend because there weren't a ton of marquee games. And
well, you had Alabama, Southern Miss, Georgia, Vanderbilt, Oregon, Arizona.
At all thinking like, man, what was I thinking?
Maybe I made the wrong.
They hung 35 up on Clark Lee's team in the first quarter. They scored 62 they called the dogs off after the first quarter.
That's bad.
They could have scored 100 on Vanderbilt if they wanted to. I'm not joking.
Easily. I mean, if you're getting 35 a quarter,
it was bad.
Yeah,
it was bad. So yeah, Vince, let's talk about some games, man. Let's roll. You want to?
Well, what we did last time is I just kind of started at the top of the AP poll and we started working our way down. I don't know if that's the way you want to go or not.
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, obviously, I could care
first
less.
Three
could not care less to talk about Alabama, Southern Miss,
of course,
Georgia, Oregon, Arizona, or Georgia, Vanderbilt. But yeah, let's do it, man.
Well, let's start with Oklahoma, West Virginia.
Football Saturday night and Sunday. I've watched a lot of college football, so.
Yep. Oklahoma, West Virginia would be the next on the list. And, it's interesting to me. Oklahoma's 4-0. They're ranked number 4 in the country, and people are calling for the starting quarterback's job. Sound familiar?
Preseason Heisman candidate, people about being a first-round pick.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I love it.
I mean, look, is he lighting the world on fire?
The fans started calling for the backup quarterback during the game like that.
They were chanting his name.
Yeah, Caleb Williams is the backup quarterback.
Williams,
that's not a good look, Oklahoma fans.
Yeah, the dude went 26 of 36. He only missed 10 passes.
Right.
Okay. I mean, I don't know.
But there's something. I'm trying to think. There's something amiss, right? What's the play? There's something amiss with the Oklahoma offense. They're just they're not clicking. And they really haven't. I mean,
I agree with that.
They clicked a little bit against Tulane. Tulane doesn't have a very good defense. They obviously clicked against that garbage FCS team they hung 76 on. I mean, the last 2 weeks, though, their offense has not looked right. They didn't look right against Nebraska. They didn't look right against West Virginia, although West Virginia has a salty defense. They had a good defense last year too. But they just, I mean, they're not running the ball. I mean, they're not running the ball well for them. They're still running the ball. I mean, if Notre Dame was running the ball like Oklahoma's struggling with their run game on, Notre Dame would be 4-0 and they'd be scoring over 50 points a game.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's like struggling for them like a normal team that doesn't have just an abysmal offensive line. I mean, they've run for 116, 277, 194, and they ran for 57 yards.
57 yards.
If Notre Dame would have ran for 57 yards against Wisconsin, they'd have scored 51 points on offense. But there's just something like you'd mentioned Caleb Williams. I mean, you mentioned Spencer. Look at me. I'm even falling victim to it. He went 26 of 36, but he only could do for 256 yards. 7.1 yards per attempt. He was 24 of 34 last week against Nebraska, which again, I mean, he's completed over 70% of his passes every week, but he's 6.3 yards per attempt last week against Nebraska. So there's clearly something going on there. I mean, put it to you like this, Vince. Last year, Spencer Rattler was below 8 yards per attempt twice all year.
Okay.
He's been below that in 3 of the 4 games this year so far.
So, I mean, he's not playing great.
I don't think it's him, though.
But you're still 4-0.
Receivers aren't getting separation. Yeah. Their running back depth chart is a hot mess.
Well, they're clearly not running the ball very well. 57 yards against West Virginia.
Yeah.
I mean,
and Spencer's just got to be more able to attack down the field, and he's not willing to do that right now. So that was it's a mess. But kudos to West Virginia, because I like when teams like that go on the road and they don't back down, they don't play scared.
Sure,
they had some opportunities to win that game. I mean,
no doubt.
Oklahoma won it because they had a bad snap that lost them like 30 yards, which set Oklahoma up. So, to me, they don't look right, but to your point, Vince, they keep winning. They are 4-0.
They keep winning.
They're like Notre Dame, though. They're gonna have to step up because their schedule gets kind of real. They play at Kansas State this week, right? Then they play Texas on a neutral field, then home against TCU, then at Kansas, and then they got to play at Baylor and at Oklahoma State still. So they better step up. But sometimes an issue I have, Vince. Sometimes we don't give the opponents enough credit.
Fair enough.
And I think West Virginia deserves a little bit of credit for that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So absolutely. What did you get a chance to watch much of that game?
I watched. It was on while we were doing our podcast, so I kind of had it on like off to the side. So I was kind of keeping an eye on it. Just a lot of bad offense on both sides, to be honest with you. From what I remember watching it, I just wasn't all that impressed with any of the offense that I was seeing in that game. So but again. Give credit to West Virginia. I have no problem with that. I mean,
West Virginia doesn't have much of an offense anyway. I mean, their offense is just kind of okay.
My takeaway from the whole thing is that Oklahoma is still a flawed football team, and it kind of goes to the narrative of that the quote unquote top teams right now, they have flaws, right? I mean, look, Alabama would be the least flawed so far of all the teams, but there's flaws on these top teams, and Oklahoma definitely exemplifies that point to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Georgia and Alabama are the 2 least flawed teams right now.
Sure.
I'd say Oregon's next, but even Oregon needed a strong fourth quarter to pull away from an Arizona team that's just like has the longest winning streak in the FBS Power 5 right now. I mean, it's almost 2 full seasons at this point in time.
Right.
So,
they had to put 17 on the board in the fourth quarter.
That's going to happen. I mean, they're not flawed. I just don't think they played well. I think they had kind of had some high leverage game. Fresno battled them. Ohio State was an emotional game. Sometimes you're just going to have that kind of deal. You're just going to have that day.
Speaking of that kind of deal, are we going to give credit to Colorado State going into Iowa?
Iowa's offense has stunk all year. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. Like, they won a game and scored like 30 points, and they had like less than 200 yards of offense. That is one of the most overrated teams in the country, in my opinion. I know there's some
And
people
they're
who are
the
going to get real
fifth-
salty about that.
They're the 5th ranked team in the
They're
country.
an ugly team. And you know what the problem is we're still like, I'm going to actually release an Irish Breakdown top 25 today. And it's really hard to do because it's almost impossible to remove your preseason bias from things.
Sure.
You know, like I'm going to have Oklahoma higher. Well, does Oklahoma really deserve to be based on how they've done this year? No, but I still have some preseason bias. And that's all I think what's happening with Iowa is they're looking at that Iowa State game as some big win.
Right.
And clearly it wasn't now. I mean, they barely beat Northern Illinois. They got smacked by Iowa. They lost by double digits to Iowa, and Iowa I don't even think got the 200 yards of total offense.
Right.
You know, they just got smacked. You know, they just got beat by Baylor, who's okay. You know, Dave Aranda's doing a real nice job turning that program around, but this is not a Baylor Art Briles team, right? It's an okay team that's going to still lose several games in that league. And you know, Iowa, you know, struggle. I mean, they struggle. 10-point win at the end, but they struggled with Colorado State, who stinks, by the way.
Right.
Who
They're
blew a
1-3.
2-touchdown lead to Vanderbilt.
They're 1-3.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're
1-3. Yeah.
They're terrible. Iowa's offense, and somebody said it in our chat on Saturday or Friday, but Iowa's going to get there soon because they're going to start playing some teams that aren't awful here real soon, and unless their offense can figure. I mean, because like Iowa's not running the ball right now.
They play Penn State. They play Wisconsin.
Yeah.
They play Purdue. All of those could be potential.
Iowa has
losses,
one
all
of the
three
best
of those
running backs in the country. So, you know, supposedly, and I think he is. I shouldn't say supposedly because I think Tyler Goodson's a really good player. They got one of the best supposedly offensive lines in the country, and they ran for 158 yards against Indiana, 4.4 yards per carry. They ran for 67 yards against Iowa State, 1.7 yards per carry, 206 against Kent State. Come on. And then they ran for 54 at 1.7 yards per carry against Colorado State.
Right.
Colorado State.
Yes.
So, and I get that Notre Dame is a team that just rushed for 3 yards. But
fair enough.
We're banging Notre Dame. We're saying Notre Dame is a flawed team because of that. But, you know, I mean, at least Notre Dame can do some other things well. I don't even think that their pass game doesn't do a whole lot for me. I'm not a big Iowa fan. This team doesn't do it for me. But yes, kudos to Colorado State for exposing Iowa as an overrated team.
Well, sure. And I mean, look, they're going to Maryland next week. They probably win that game. I'm not overly enthusiastic about Maryland, but then the rubber meets the road with
I'm
Penn
going to
State.
disagree with you on that one.
Really?
Yes. Maryland's 4-0.
Okay.
They beat West Virginia, which now looks like a much better win now, in my opinion.
Okay.
You know, because again, look at what West Virginia's done so far, right? West Virginia lost on the road by 6 points to Maryland, and then they lost a tough road game against Oklahoma, but then they beat Virginia Tech, who was ranked, and then they destroyed, was it Long Island U? But you know, I mean, they you know, look, they didn't look great against Illinois, but they got the W.
Yeah,
right?
they won by 3,
and they smacked Kent State pretty good. And they've got some athletes. The thing that about Maryland that we're going to find out this weekend is we've seen Maryland kind of have starts like this before, and then just completely collapse.
Right.
You know, like I remember, was it 19? They beat Howard 79-0. Then they played a Syracuse team that I think was ranked going into the season. Because remember, Syracuse was coming off that 10-win season, and they beat them like 63-20. Maryland did. And you're like,
right.
Wow. And I think they jumped into the top 25. And then they go play Temple the next week and lose to Temple. And then just like won one game the rest of the year. And you know, they start off in 2018, they beat Texas, right? Remember, Texas was a preseason top 10 team, beat Bowling Green, then they lost to Temple and then bounced back with a win over Minnesota. They're 3-1, looks like a great start. And then they won 2 of their next 8 games. They're a weird team, but they're also a talented team. And on offense, you know, Tua's little brother is playing really well. You know, they got a couple receivers that are really good. Dante Demas is a really good player. Raheem Jarrett was a 5-star recruit that went from he's from DC, but he was committed to LSU, flipped to Maryland. So they've got some athletes. We're going to find out if Mike Locksley knows how to get these guys ready to play this weekend, Vince, because they have I think they've looked good so far. But but this weekend is going to be so I guess I don't necessarily say I disagree with you on how they looked so far. I'm not necessarily saying I expect them to win this weekend.
I was going to say, are they on upset alert? Is Iowa on upset alert here?
If Maryland plays like they have so far this season, yeah, because you don't got to score a ton to beat Iowa. I mean, that's the thing,
True.
And the thing I liked about Maryland too that is different is West Virginia was kind of doing some things that you say in the past. You say, oh, this is where Maryland folds. They didn't fold. Same thing with Illinois. They're playing like crap, but they did what they needed to do to win at the end. Those are games that they would lose in the past.
Right.
And so I'm going to give them credit for that. But, we're really going to find out this weekend if they're for real. But my disagreement is not so much that they're going to beat Iowa. It's more so that I actually have liked what I've seen from them so far this year.
See, I feel like if Iowa loses to Maryland, it's because they're looking forward to the following week against Penn State.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like this is your typical trap game for Iowa, Yeah. So,
because I wonder how many of the players feel the same way about Maryland that you do.
Right, exactly.
Right? I mean, that's a very good point, Vince.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's get to some more games. Let's talk about some more games.
Do you want to talk Penn State Villanova because that wasn't much of a contest? But I mean, if you want to give your thoughts on Penn State, I don't want to talk
about any FBS games. I want to see Penn. I still don't know what to make of Penn State.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought that their win over Maryland or Wisconsin was more about Wisconsin pissing that game away than it was about them beating them. I don't think much of Auburn right now, but they're doing what they need to do. Right, that's the big thing is they played an FBS team this weekend. It's a good FBS team. Villanova is usually a pretty good FBS team, but they did what they needed to do. I'm not sold on them so much right now, but I feel that way. I mean, Vince, you could just kind of insert that on everybody. I'm not sold on that team yet. If your name's not Georgia, Alabama, or Oregon, I'm not sold on you yet. I mean, that's where I'm at right now.
Right.
That
only leaves one spot open in the college football playoff. So I mean,
there's going to be a lot of games coming up here soon where the contenders and pretenders are going to
kind of thin the herd out a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. So the next one on the list is the one that you called would be Arkansas, Texas A&M. With Arkansas pretty much putting a whooping on Texas A&M. I don't know. I mean, they didn't have a lead at any point in the game.
No, I mean, it was 17-0 early, and it's 20-10 was the final. I mean,
Texas A&M, they scratched back, but they didn't.
Arkansas was playing without their starting quarterback. He got hurt in the third quarter, and they kind of just went like, let's run the clock out kind of thing because their backup quarterback's a runner. He's not really a thrower. And the whole reason why I predicted them to lose, Vince, was – number one, Arkansas has two things to beat Texas A&M. They have really good skill, right? Traylon Burks is a really good receiver. He had a huge play in the game. They have really good skill and a quarterback that's athletic and willing to take some shots, KJ Jefferson. If you remember correctly, I loved KJ coming out of high school.
Yeah.
But the other thing, too, is Texas A&M, they have a salty defense. They're not a great defense, but they have a salty defense, and Texas A&M's offense is garbage. This is a team that scored 10 points against Colorado. Okay, their offense is garbage, and I didn't think you needed to score much to beat them, and that's exactly what happened. You don't have to score much to beat them. But Arkansas it is amazing. This is a team that used to just self-destruct every single week. Whenever adversity happened, that team would just fold. And Sam Pittman has them playing hard.
Yeah, I'm impressed because where they came from when you and I did the pregame show, or not pregame, but preseason show on Arkansas to where they are now. I mean, light years different. I was pretty shocked because look, I'll be the first one to admit I'm not following Arkansas and what they're doing between last year and up to this point. I looked at Arkansas going into last year and looked at it being a rout from Notre Dame, and then I stopped paying attention. So
and it would have been last year.
I'm impressed.
It would have been a rout last year.
Yeah.
This year,
absolutely.
Not so much.
Agreed. Okay, so next game is the big one.
Can we just say this real quick? Please. This is why we said before the season, Texas A&M is overrated. They were getting way too much hype.
They got no offense.
How good your defense is. When your offense is that bad, it doesn't matter how good your defense is.
Right. Yep. And we talked about that formula a long time ago. Defense doesn't win championships anymore. I mean, you defense will get you to a good spot, but offense needs to carry you the rest of the way, and they clearly don't have an offense that's going to do that. So it's going to be a long season for A&M. They just, they got a piece of it today, or I mean on Saturday, but
on a neutral field.
More will be coming. I have a
Yes.
feeling.
Yeah, well,
So,
they got Mississippi State at home this weekend, and then October 9th, that team from Tuscaloosa comes to town. So
that's going to be an epic beatdown. Okay. The big one, the big upset of the weekend was NC State double overtime victory over Clemson, 27-21. Clemson's offense just continues to struggle. And I mean, look,
that's
we knew
being
that
kind.
we knew the Clemson defense was going to be good, okay? And they are good, okay?
Saturday was the first time they've given up an offensive touchdown.
Right. They're good. But the offense is, I mean, former 5-star quarterback DJ Uiagalelei only puts up 111 yards on 12 of 26. 12 of 26, a 4.3 yard average. Okay. I just, that's not going to get it done at any level of football, let alone as a top 5, top 10 team.
Vince, you know, he has yet to get to 200 yards passing in a game.
That's based on what we saw against Notre Dame last year. Okay. Just that little piece. I'm shocked. Look, I never thought that he was going to be Trevor Lawrence. I never thought that he was going to be a mobile quarterback and be able to do things. But I thought he could stand in the pocket and sling the rock.
Yeah.
And he can't even do that right now.
This is what we always say. Don't assume because the guy did A as a backup quarterback off the bench that he's going to do A when he becomes a starter.
Well played, sir.
I've been saying this for a million times. And this isn't about DJ, though. This is a couple things. Number one is there's way too much hype on him. Number one, he's a redshirt. He's basically a sophomore, right? Who had 2 starts, and that's really all he did last year. Offensive line is terrible. And if Jack Cohn, as a 5th-year senior, is struggling to play behind a porous offensive line, imagine being a sophomore.
Sure.
Who played at one of the 5 best high school teams in the country. He was never rattled like this. He didn't play at Sayville High School in New York, right? Where he was, Jack Cohn was playing against a bunch of guys who are never going to play college football at any level, right? This kid played at St. John Bosco, where every time they took the field, they were significantly more talented than anybody they played except maybe once or twice. And he's got a terrible offensive line, and they're having the same problem that is my fear about Notre Dame in the future, which is they have a bunch of receivers that do the exact same thing. And when your offensive line isn't good and you don't have guys like Amari Rogers or Ray McLeod or Hunter Renfro, and your offense is just built around vertical guys, well, guess what? You don't have time to get the ball out to them.
Yeah. And
then you're asking those guys to do things like bubbles and quick stuffs, and that's just not – Joseph Ngata is not that kind of guy. You're trying to make him be that guy, and he's not that guy. Their running back depth chart is a mess because of injuries and guys transferring out. They got one-dimensional receivers. It's like they started recruiting big names and went away from building their depth chart with what got them there, which was speed and playmaking ability. They got a bunch of big guys, and it's just everything that could go. And I'm gonna say something else.
Okay.
With all due respect, it's like, so sometimes. Like, okay, I'll say this. I'll use our show for an example. I did my own show for a while, and it was fine. It was whatever, but I didn't like doing it because it was just me. You could go do your own show, and maybe it'll be great, but maybe it's not. But I think sometimes people work better together, right?
Yeah.
I feel Tony Elliott and Jeff Scott are 2 guys that separate are not necessarily great coaches, but when they were together, they just had that connection, and they were a great combination. The Clemson offense has not been the same since Jeff Scott left for South Florida. Jeff Scott's not doing anything at South Florida either.
Right.
And it's not so much that, it was always Jeff Scott all along. No, I think Tony Elliott's a really smart guy. But when you've got that guy that you kind of came up with, they were young assistants together under the Chad Morris, and then they took over as co-coordinators, and they worked great together. And sometimes you lose that second voice, you know what I mean? And that guy that you counseled or you counted on and you could run ideas by, and they don't have that now.
Yeah, there's something.
And
to
their
be said
offense has not been the same. And what we said this summer was Trevor Lawrence and to a degree Travis Etienne hit a lot of warts that were there. And this is what we talked about. Did I think they were going to be this bad on offense, Vince? No. Did you and I say they weren't going to be as good this year as people think they were? They're going to take a step back? Yes. I didn't think it was going to be this big of a step back.
Right, exactly.
That's been the surprise for me. Like, yeah, they're not throwing it, but they're also not running it. I mean, they're not doing anything. It's like, whew. And this is why I said a couple weeks ago, I'd much rather be Notre Dame right now than Clemson. And some people laughed and so you're crazy. And I'm like, okay, how you feel about that now? Because they just lost to NC State, who got smacked by Mississippi State 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to say this is the beginning of the end for Clemson and their run, but they're going to have a tough time, I think, getting back to the elite status. They're still going to be in contention and they're still going to be hanging around for a while. But I think the elite part of things might be over for a little bit.
I think he needs to – it depends on how he handles this offseason.
Okay.
I think if he's unwilling to make some changes, like there was a time it was around like 13 and 14, like Alabama went 2 years without winning a title and people were losing their minds.
Yeah, right.
And Saban made some changes to the program that kind of got them going again. Dabo's going to have to do that. I think it's gotten a little stale. Their recruiting hasn't been quite as good on offense the last couple of years. They're getting big names, but not necessarily. Like one thing that Clemson did so well early in the 2010s and to the middle, like up to the point of their run starting, is they would get the big names, but they also mixed those guys in with some really good, role players. They would go out and find the Isaiah Simmonses, the 3-star kids that had great athleticism that they developed. Now they're just going after the big name recruits. It seems like more often than not. And it's like, it's kind of puzzling what they're doing right now, recruiting wise.
Right.
And I mean,
it just feels like they're losing their way a little bit to me.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
it's like it's stale.
Yes. Exactly correct. Yep.
I'll say something. I think part of the problem is I think playing in the ACC has masked some problems too.
Right. And because there's such a disparity between Clemson and everybody else. I mean, at least for the last
you're still blowing people
10
out,
years.
But there's the Ohio State game last year should have been the wake up call for them, in my opinion, because they were embarrassed. Like LSU the year before, LSU was just a better team. I mean, Clemson battled and had a lead early. I mean, for a decent amount of the first half, Clemson was pinning LSU back and playing good D. I think they had like a 17.7 lead at one point in time. It just LSU's the better team.
Yeah.
They were embarrassed by Ohio State last year. And I don't think Ohio State was necessarily that good of a team, as we found out against Alabama. They made Clemson look bad. That should have been his wake-up call. That, hey, we got to do something different. There's something stale here that we got to fix. And if it's definitely going to have to happen now. Yeah.
Well, as I peruse down the list here, I think Ohio State Akron, probably not going to talk about that one.
Other than Kevon Pope losing his freaking mind, they kicked him off the team today. Big shocker.
Oh, really? What happened there? Help me out.
Apparently, he was supposed to go on the field, and a player waved him off, and he went and just like lost his mind on the sideline. Took his jersey off, threw it in the sideline. Went up and got in Ryan's Day's face, and he's like, "Get out of here!" Threw his gloves off. Went into the locker room, and tweeted "FUCC Ohio State" from his Twitter account. Like they had to escort him off the field. And he eventually went back and said, "I'm sorry, I lost my cool." It's like, yeah, you can apologize, but it ain't happening. Sometimes there's no coming back from that.
Yeah.
Wow. And he not only burnt that bridge, he dropped an atomic bomb on it.
No kidding.
And then launched 3 tomahawks afterwards, just in case there was something left over.
Just to make sure.
It was bad. It was bad.
Bad. Got a lot to say about that, but I don't know. It enhances my thoughts of Ohio State.
Yes.
It just does.
Yes.
Anyway, Florida took care of business against Tennessee in the Swamp. That one was never really close. Tennessee had a lead briefly in the second quarter, but Tennessee's still a ways away yet. I think from any kind of relevance.
Yep. I'm gonna give 2 thoughts to skip ahead because I want to get your thoughts because I know you got to leave here soon.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Michigan, Rutgers. I'm not going to overreact too much. Is Rutgers just better than we think? Is Michigan do they have an off game? We're going to find out this weekend. Nebraska completely dominated Michigan State in the second half and pissed away an opportunity to get an upset win. Just pissed it away. The game I want to talk about.
Okay.
Georgia Tech curb stomping North Carolina. Did you
Okay.
watch any of that game?
I
was
did not.
competitive.
I did not see that game, but it's one that I had planned on going back and watching some of because of the outcome.
45-22.
Where did the Yellow Jackets come from? I mean, I realize they're
How
2-2.
do you lose to Northern Illinois and then almost beat Clemson at Clemson and then curb stomp North Carolina? But how bad is North Carolina's defense? Can we finally dispense with the Jay Bateman's a great defensive coordinator conversation? Like, there were people advocating for that guy to be hired. And I know this is a personal bias. I don't dislike Jay Bateman personally, but I coached against Jay Bateman, and we put 600-plus yards on Jay Bateman's defense, okay? And I know it was 1AA, whatever, but I've never seen anything different. He was an Army, and I'm like, people are talking about him being a Notre Dame guy. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. Their defense was and they do not play inspired football. When they get hit in the mouth, I've noticed this year, when they start fast, like they did against Virginia last week, they're good. But if you punch them in the mouth early, they fold.
Yeah.
And that surprises me a little bit.
Well, they gave up just shy of 400 yards to Georgia stinking Tech. Okay.
Yes.
Now, here are my overall thoughts about this game. I am no longer worried about the North Carolina game. I'm really not. Mm-hmm. But I'm more worried about the Georgia Tech game than I was at the beginning of the season.
I'm not.
That's where I'm at.
That's just how bad. When you watch I want you to watch the game,
okay,
and come back and talk to me about that.
Okay,
I know you. I know you know football. I know how you think.
Yeah,
you're gonna watch. I'd be like, no, North Carolina just sucked.
Okay,
because you're gonna be like, yeah, of course, we know that they got weapons. You know, Jeff Sims is a really athletic quarterback, but this was not. I mean, Georgia Tech played hard and all that, but you're not gonna be worried about Georgia Tech. You're just gonna be like, wow, North Carolina sucks.
Okay,
they're bad, and their offensive line is not physical at all. And it's like, oh, you know, hey, look, Javonte Williams and Michael Carter aren't walking through that door. You know what I mean? Like, Julius Peppers and Dre Bly aren't working through that. Well, Dre is, but he's an assistant coach now.
He doesn't have the pads on. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it was embarrassing. Like,
I mean, they only had 63 yards rushing.
Yes.
I mean, that is embarrassing considering you just graduated 2,000-yard rushers.
Yes.
I mean, and it was those running backs were good, but it was scheme based too.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest, it was scheme based.
Williams is especially really good.
Yeah.
These next couple games, they're going to be able to get healthy. They play Duke at home, Florida State at home, and then Miami at home before they play Notre Dame. And then vaunted by a week. So I'm curious to see how they mentally bounce back this week.
Okay.
And I know you got to go, but I'm going to tell you what, Vince, another game I want you to watch. I want you to watch Wake Forest. They are legit.
Really?
They are legit. They are for an ACC. I mean, they're not going to go make the college football playoff and win a title. I'm just in the ACC for the ACC title. They're legit. The ACC to me is done. I don't see Wake Forest going. I mean, if Wake Forest and BC go undefeated, they'll be in the playoff, but they're not going undefeated. The ACC's done, which is good for Notre Dame. But I want you to watch Wake Forest just from an ACC context. They're legit within the ACC. I want you to watch them. And they have fewer career returning starts than Notre Dame. They're consistently less experienced than Notre Dame across the board, and yet they're scoring and running and doing all that kind of stuff. So, I want you to check them out.
Okay, I can do that. Yeah. I can definitely do that. So,
because that was definitely a game this weekend that I thought was interesting.
Okay, fair enough. I'm writing it down.
Yes.
Wake.
Yes.
And UNC.
Texas hung 70 on Texas Tech. That was another interesting takeaway from the weekend.
Texas. Lord.
Yeah. And then and that loss to Arkansas looks a lot better right now. Oklahoma continues to win ugly, upset Kansas State. And UCLA, our sleeper team for the season, is now 3-0 with an 11-point win at Stanford. Stanford falls to 2-2. So that was another one. And how about Georgia State almost beating Auburn?
Oh, yeah.
They had to get some home cooking to win that game.
Yes, they did. They had to score 15 in the fourth quarter just to win that game.
Props on the coach for Georgia State calling that out, too. Like, well, they got some SEC home cooking. He said that after the game. It was beautiful. So
go ahead and fine them.
I know you got to roll. This was a fun show. We need to not talk as much about Brian Kelly next time and talk more about the weekend's games.
I know.
Because this is a lot of fun. There were still so many other games I wanted to talk about from this weekend. SMU beat TCU on the road. I mean, just some Toledo got a W, and Florida State is 0-4. They lost at home to Louisville.
They're so
Just-
bad.
They are.
I mean, can you imagine if Notre Dame would have blown that one? Can you? I mean, we'd be having a way different conversation right now.
We're going to end it with this, Vince. How about those Beavers, baby?
Putting a hurting on the Trojans, man.
Oh, my gosh. I so thoroughly enjoyed it. And it wasn't even really close. I mean, like, Oregon State was the better team.
Oregon State.
They were the better team. I mean, they came out in the second half, and USC made no adjustments. And Jonathan Smith coached circles around Todd Orlando in the second half of that game.
Yeah, whatever was left.
Keaton Slovis is so overrated. So's Graham Harrell. That was embarrassing. And I'm curious, Vince. I have a feeling USC is just going to implode.
Love it.
My fear was that you get the new coach and like they just I've got nothing to lose and they just play loose and all that. Nope, they're going to implode because they got to play at Colorado this week and then home against Utah before they get a bye and they got to come to Notre Dame. So anyway, we had to end that.
Massacre.
We had to end it with USC getting curb stomped by Oregon freaking State.
Fantastic.
Who lost to Purdue. I'm just saying.
Fantastic.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, and it wasn't all that close against Purdue either.
Yes,
and,
yes. Oregon, that's right. Oregon, D-Rock. Oregon State had not won in the Coliseum in 61 years.
It's crazy.
Because
Oregon State's not a good team.
No. Even when they had Chad Johnson and all of them, those guys, I mean, USC was kind of just starting their great run, but still 61 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And the fan attendance was that program is done for now. And I don't know who's going to take that job, but they're done. So I enjoyed that thoroughly. And that's a great way to end our show today. Before you leave, hit the like button, hit the subscribe bell, hit the notification bell. If you're listening via podcast, give us a 5-star review. And of course, sign up for our message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. For Vince, Brian, everybody have a great rest of your day. We will talk to you again tomorrow. We're going to dive into Notre Dame and Cincinnati, Vince. It is a big, big week. This could be the week that determines if Notre Dame is going to be a playoff team, and we're going to explain that to you all, why that is over these next few shows. So, Vince, get back to class.
Yes, sir.
Talk to you soon, buddy.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.